Do you ever find yourself doubting yourself? Wondering if you made the right choice? Wondering if you'll pass that big test or find that new job or complete that project or make it through some of those turbulent and unsettled and uncertain times and be able to help the people that are in those times with you do the same? Unless you've had swift success after swift success after swift success, with very few failures or setbacks or confusing, how will I work my way through that one circumstances, my guess is probably. And probably that even as you try to push them away, that doubts keep creeping back into your mind. It's because living confidently, it's hard. Just as hard as living fearlessly. Even in matters of faith. I mean, you'd think in matters of faith that Easter would help with that, and it seems to for a while. But it's only a week after Easter right now, and already Easter seems like it was a long, long time ago. Makes you wonder sometimes, why doesn't Easter stick? Why doesn't Easter stick better? Well, I think perhaps Easter doesn't stick better because, life intervenes. And your mind struggles to believe things that you can't really see or explain and accept the truth of things that you only hear when what you're experiencing tells you something different. Living confidently is hard, and it always has been, even for people who really want to believe. I mean, the most famous doubter in the Bible is Thomas. You can read his story in the Bible in John chapter 20. Thomas is the one who said, unless I see, unless I touch, unless I put my fingers in his wounds, in his hands, in his side, I will not believe. All right, but Thomas isn't the only one. Thomas isn't the only doubter. He's just the most famous in a long line of people that first Easter who had doubts that what they'd heard, Jesus has risen, was actually true. The women who were the first ones to see the empty tomb ran to tell the other disciples what they'd seen and heard. But instead of believing the words, here's what we read Luke recording about the events of that day. Luke chapter 24, verse 11. But they did not believe the women, because their words seemed to them like nonsense. Living confidently is hard. Well, at least Peter ran to check things out for himself. But even after he gets to the empty tomb and he sees it with his own eyes, he still didn't believe the words of the angel or the report of the women, not yet. Living confidently is hard. And a little later in the day, the risen Jesus shows up on the roadside as two disciples are walking back home to Emmaus. And they didn't recognize Jesus. And while they'd heard stories of an empty tomb, they didn't believe it. Here's how Luke records that part of the conversation. Luke 24, starting at verse 22. In addition, some of our women amazed us. They went to the tomb early this morning, but they didn't find his body. They came and told us that they had seen a vision of the angels who said he was alive. Then some of our companions went to the tomb and found it just as the women had said, but they did not see Jesus. In other words, we didn't believe the women. And when the men went to check things out, they saw an empty grave, but they didn't see Jesus. And we've never seen a resurrection. So even though we want it to be true, we can't find a way to believe that it actually is true. We just can't understand. And if we can't understand it, if we can't see it, well, how can we believe it? Living confidently is hard. And later that evening, the disciples back in Jerusalem are in that same place too. They're behind locked doors, but their friends from that road to Emmaus have come running back to tell them that they had seen Jesus, but those Jerusalem disciples, they're still doubting. Even when Jesus shows up in person through those locked doors, they still didn't think that it was Jesus. They're behind locked doors, and Jesus shows up, and they're more thinking that it's like some ghost or apparition, like they had thought when Jesus came out walking to them on the water a couple of years before. Here's how Luke records that. They were still talking about this. Jesus himself stood among them and said to them, "Peace be with you." They were startled and frightened, thinking they saw a ghost. So living confidently is hard. I mean, from the beginning, they all had good information. He's the word of an angel. He's risen, just as he said, and the report of their eyes that the grave was in fact empty, but they still had their doubts. And they still struggled to believe. And those good news Easter words just weren't sticking. I mean, living confidently is, well, it's hard. And Jesus knows that. Jesus knows that living confidently is hard. Jesus knows all about our doubts, and he doesn't want us to stay there. Right? Jesus wants us to be able to live confidently. And Jesus wants those words of Easter to stick with us like chewing gum or duct tape or sticky buns, not to slide out of our hearts and our minds like some food off some Teflon pan or one of those hex-clad Gordon Ramsay pans that you see advertised on Facebook all the time. No, Jesus wants that Easter confidence to stick with us, no matter what we're going through. And no matter what kind of doubts that we might have. Jesus also knows what it takes to get to that living confidently space. And so as you listen to what Luke records about what happened that first Easter evening, I want you to notice this. Notice how Jesus enters that space of our doubts in order to lead you through to greater faith. And how in your doubts, Jesus comes close and helps you see, well, just enough to strengthen the faith that's already there. Luke chapter 24, starting at verse 36. Listen.
While they were still talking about this, Jesus himself stood among them and said to them, "Peace be with you." They were startled and frightened, thinking they saw a ghost. He said to them, "Why are you troubled, and why do doubts rise in your minds? Look at my hands and my feet. It is I myself. Touch me and see. A ghost does not have flesh and bones, as you see I have." When he had said this, he showed them his hands and feet. And while they still did not believe it because of joy and amazement, he asked them, "Do you have anything here to eat?" They gave him a piece of broiled fish, and he took it and ate it in their presence. He said to them, "This is what I told you while I was still with you. Everything must be fulfilled that is written about me in the law of Moses, the prophets, and the Psalms." Then he opened their minds so they could understand the scriptures.
Why are you troubled? And why do doubts arise in your minds? Why? And perhaps you hear an accusation there. An accusation like, well, how could you not believe this? How could you not live confidently? Why are you so slow to embrace the truth, which would then make you feel even more guilty and less confident? But I don't think that's what's going on here. I don't think that Jesus is making an accusation here, because remember, Jesus wants you to be able to live confidently. And he's there to help you do that because he knows that you can't do it on your own. So I don't think that Jesus' question here, why are you doubting, is an accusation. I don't think it's a condemnation. I think Jesus' question, why are you doubting, is actually an invitation here. It's an invitation to look further. An invitation to look further and to believe not only what you see, but also what you've heard all along, and then in the end to re-examine things on the basis of what you're seeing and hearing now, and ask yourself, well, why was I doubting? I do believe. It is real. That's living confidently. It just takes Jesus' help for us to get there. Right? See, when Jesus first showed up on that evening, they thought he was a ghost because the resurrection's outside their personal experience. And it's outside any categories that they're familiar with, that they can wrap their minds around. And outside your experience and outside the categories you're familiar with is the space where doubt really starts to creep in. So because Jesus wants them to be able to live confidently, what Jesus does here is he says, well, look closer. That's his invitation. Look closer. See, touch, examine the evidence. It's really me. The touch there, that's the evidence. Jesus is saying that I'm real. You can't touch a ghost. Right? And the focus on his wounds, that's the evidence of love. See, I've done all this for you. And the impact of his words, it is I myself. Well, those words were evidence to the disciples that this was actually a God thing going on, which is what's required for a resurrection to be real, the power and the action of God making it happen. Because you see, the way that Jesus spoke those words to the disciples hinted at that, because it wasn't simply a, hey, it's me, guys. No, Jesus there used the specific phrase, I am. In the same way, with the same words that God used in revealing himself to Moses at the burning bush. And the same words Jesus used to tell his disciples things like, I am the good shepherd. I am the bread of life. And before Abraham was, I am, meaning, well, I'm God. I'm the eternal God. And so, because I'm God, my resurrection is real. It's a God thing that you're witnessing here. Look and believe. Right? And leaning into that, what they had now saw and heard, the touch of Jesus and the focus on his wounds and those I am, it's God here. They were on their way to living confidently. On their way, but not quite there yet. See, their doubt and fear changed. It changed from, no way this could happen, to, wow, maybe it really did. But they're still not living confidently. And now their doubt and fear comes just from a different place. From the joy that Jesus is alive, but the doubt and fear is still there, probably because they're now thinking, well, but if he's still alive, well, what does this mean for me? What does this mean for us? Is this the end of the world? And God, I mean, we're standing here on holy ground. And so they're still not living confidently. Now take a few minutes before we go on in this conversation to stop and think about how that connects with your own life right now. Go ahead and pause and ask yourself this. Where are you struggling to live confidently in your faith right now? And then as you think about that, ask yourself, what have you found helpful in dealing with those doubts? Go ahead, hit pause, talk about those things, and when you're ready, hit play again. So what does Jesus do when you're wanting to live confidently, but despite everything, you're still having some doubts? Well, again, notice that Jesus doesn't condemn you or accuse you for those doubts. He actually leads you through those doubts. He leads you through those doubts the same way he did for the first disciples. He meets you where you are. He meets you in that space of doubt where you are and leads you through your doubt and fear to the place that he wants you to go, living confidently. Here's how Luke records the rest of the evening, verse 41. And while they still did not believe it because of joy and amazement, he asked them, "Do you have anything here to eat?" See what Jesus does? As they're moving toward living confidently, but they're not there yet, Jesus comes even closer and he says, "Okay, look closer. Look closer. Do ghosts eat? Well, give me some food. I'm eating. I'm eating. Look and believe." And then look closer. Look closer and don't just hear my words. Look to the Word. Remember some Bible. Read some Bible. And as you do, believe that what God has said will come true because it's God who said it. Verse 44 and 45, he said to them, "This is what I told you while I was still with you. Everything must be fulfilled that is written about me in the law of Moses, the prophets, and the Psalms." Then he opened their minds so they could understand the Scriptures. And then the doubts started to go away. Jesus invited them to come closer, and they did. And they believed that Jesus had really risen from the dead. And believing that, they started to live a little more confidently, just like Jesus wanted them to. So what can we learn from this story about living confidently? Well, number one, that you might not want to doubt, but you're going to have doubts, especially when what you see around you doesn't seem to make sense. But Jesus knows that, and he doesn't condemn you for it. He doesn't condemn you for having doubts, but he also doesn't want you to stay there. And because he doesn't want you to stay there, he knows there's a much better space for you to be living in, and so he enters those places as your doubt. I mean, Jesus enters those places of your doubt in order to lovingly lead you through it. And Jesus comes close, and when you doubt, he invites you, hey, just look a little closer. Look a little closer. And it's going to help you live more confidently. Look closer. See Jesus' wounds. And so remember Jesus' love for you. Look closer. Hear Jesus' words and remember that they're always true, even when you don't see how they can be. Look closer and lean into the relationship. And remember that Jesus is I am, that he's the one eternal God. And he says, I'm here. I'm here. I'm with you. I'm loving you. I'm loving you through this. I'm helping you. I'm giving you what you need. I'm God, so I can make it happen. Look closer. And lean into the Bible. Lean into the Bible and remember not only the truth of his words, but the truth of his track record. Look closer so you can live a little more confidently, just like Jesus wants you to. And here's some steps that you can take this week to get you in that direction. Get in the Word regularly. Get that verse of the day. Get a Bible reading plan. Listen to messages, this one and other ones. Show up at church. Do Bible with others, whether it's a group or family devotions, but get in the Word regularly. Number 2, get communion regularly. Remember how Jesus said, hey, give me some food and you'll see that I'm real? Well, in communion, Jesus gives us some food and says, here I am real. You need to know that and feel that and sense that so you can live confidently. So get communion regularly. And get with others regularly. Because they can support and encourage you in the faith and help you to live a little more confidently when you're really struggling to. Here's some Bible on that. Hebrews chapter 10, verse 25. And let us not give up meeting together. Some are in the habit of doing this. Instead, let us encourage one another with words of hope. And 1 Thessalonians 5, verse 11, so encourage each other and build each other up, just as you are already doing. So get with others when you're finding it hard to have much faith at all. They'll help encourage you and build you up. And then, when you have those doubts, remember to talk to Jesus about them too. Talk to Jesus about them. Pray something like, well, Lord, I do believe, but help my unbelief. And He will. He will, because Jesus wants to help you live confidently, even when you still have some questions about some of the things going on around you.